arresting protesters and dismantling tents. Now, hundreds of troops and police commandos moved on the protesters outside the presidential offices in Colombo as before they were due to leave the area. Meanwhile, Dinesh Gunawardena has now been sworn in as Sri Lanka's new prime minister just hours after soldiers and police cleared the anti-government protest in Colombo. Mr. Dinesh is a veteran member of the ruling Sri Lanka's People's Front and an ally of the Rajapaksa political family.
The military in Sri Lanka has taken control of the presidential secretariat and the capital after brutally assaulting the protesters. Soldiers also destroyed tents at the adjacent Gotogema protest site, arrested several protest leaders, and condoned off the area together with about 100 protesters. The military assault came hours after the protesters withdrew from the camp in front of temple trees, the Prime Minister's official residence. The protesters had already announced their intention to withdraw from the presidential secretariat on July 22nd. He sustained minor injuries, he said, while trying to run away from the military crackdown. As the military attack began, Jayasekara streamed it live, but later lost his smartphone in the chaos. It is estimated that about 10 protesters were badly injured after being attacked. The assault on the protest site came after Ranil Wickremesinghe, a six-time prime minister, took the oath as the country's new president. His predecessor, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, had fled the country after weeks of protests triggered by the country's economic collapse and growing public anger over the Rajapaksa's long-time political influence. The Sri Lanka Bar Association said it had been made aware of the raids and that there had been arrests. Several people aired the assault live on social media, but the stream stopped several times, thought to be interrupted by the authorities. Video footage shared on social media showed how soldiers approached the protest site and turned away from one man when he shouted, "Media, media, BBC." Then they continued on to inspect the tents erected by the protesters.
To the Middle East, an Israeli attack has killed 3 Syrian soldiers and injured 7 others near Damascus. That's according to the Syrian Defense Ministry. The ministry says Syrian air defense forces had intercepted missiles that were launched from the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights to the west of Damascus. The Israeli military says it does not comment on foreign reports. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitor said an additional 3 foreign nationals had been killed, bringing the total number of deaths to 6 and that 10 people were wounded in total. A man has attacked U.S. Representative Lee Zeldin at a campaign event near Rochester, New York, Thursday evening, according to officials and witnesses. The Monroe County Sheriff's Office said 43-year-old David Jacobonis went on stage at the event at the Veterans of Foreign Wars post in Perrington with a weapon around 8 p.m. and attacked Mr. Zeldin before being restrained by people in the audience and members of his campaign. Mr. Zeldin, a Republican running for New York governor, was not injured and no other injuries were reported. Let's now bring you updates on the war in Ukraine as Turkey says it has brokered a deal with Russia to unblock exports of grain from Ukraine through the Black Sea. The agreement is due to be signed in Istanbul this afternoon by Ukraine, Russia, Turkey, and the UN Secretary General. Russian and Ukraine teams have arrived in Istanbul to sign the deal. Ukraine rules out signing a direct deal with Russia. Instead, both countries will sign mirror deals. Ukraine is one of the world's largest grain producers, and Russia has been blockading its major Black Sea ports. The world shortage of Ukrainian grain has sent food prices soaring and left millions at risk of hunger. With the war, head of Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service, Richard Moore, says Russia will struggle to maintain its military campaign and Ukraine may be able to hit back. He said Russia had seen epic fails in its initial goals, removing Ukraine's president, capturing Kyiv, and sowing disunity in the West. He made the revelation at the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado. In Europe, wildfires continue to rage across the continent, where a heat wave has intensified drought conditions. Though temperatures have cooled in France and the UK, firefighters are still tackling blazes in Greece, Spain, and Italy. The fires in France badly hit southwest have started to be brought under control, and as the heat wave moves northeast, low water levels are hampering transport on rivers in Germany. Heat waves have become more frequent, more intense, and last longer because of human-induced climate change. In the African continent, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa says his government is targeting achieving a $12 billion mining industry by 2023, given the growing momentum in the industry. He said it was encouraging that last year, and despite the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the mining sector's performance amounted to $5.2 billion from $2.9 billion in 2017. Mr. Mnangagwa stated this while opening the annual mining exhibition in the second city of Bulawayo. To the U.S., where the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is wishing President Joe Biden well as he tested positive for COVID-19, underscoring the extent to which the virus has infiltrated American society. Ms. Pelosi said she hopes Mr. Biden's positive test for the virus will cause more Americans to get vaccinated and boosted, because, quote, none of us is immune from it, including the President of the United States, and we really have to be careful, end quote. The White House said the 79-year-old Biden is experiencing very mild symptoms, including a stuffy nose, fatigue, and cough.
Hey folks, guess you heard this morning I tested positive for COVID, but I've been double vaccinated, double boosted, symptoms are mild, and I really appreciate your inquiries and your concerns. But I'm doing well, I'm getting a lot of work done, I'm going to continue to get it done, and in the meantime, thanks for your concern, and keep the faith, it's going to be okay.
Request for this year. On my way here, I learned that our president is perhaps diagnosed with COVID. I understand that the symptoms are light. I hope they continue to be so. That was my experience, and I hope that that's the case for the president. Yesterday, probably you saw, we had the great honor of having the First Lady of Ukraine.
With health stories, the World Health Organization has announced the next step in its release of the world's first approved malaria vaccine. The release is expected to take place in 3 African countries, Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi. But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a vaccine supporter, has said it has concerns. The Gates Foundation told newsmen this week that it will no longer financially support the vaccine. Some scientists warn the decision could leave millions of African children at risk. Executive Director of Health Emergency Initiative, PASCHAL ACHUNINE, joins me via Zoom to discuss this. Good to have you join us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
I think it was 9 months ago where the first announcement was made that the vaccine or the possibility of the vaccine being rolled out in a few months' time was high. And now the announcement has now been made that the vaccine will soon be rolled out. But the main financial backer, which is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, have now pulled out, saying they have concerns because the vaccine is just about, I think, 30% effective. They wanted to speak to that, if their concerns should be taken into account.
It should have been a cheering news to hear that there's a vaccine to the issues around malaria. Malaria remains a major issue in Africa. In 2020, for instance, 620,000 people died. Nigeria alone recorded 27% of those deaths, and they are mainly children of 0 to 5. So it's something that concerted effort, collaborative effort, and consistent effort should be expected from all stakeholders, not just Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But we are concerned, and it may not have been out there clearly, but it appears that perhaps the sort of support, cooperation from government, because if you go back to countries like El Salvador and other countries that were certified malaria-free, there was consistent deployment of resources annually to eradicate malaria. In Africa, most African countries where it's still endemic, that is not happening. So perhaps that is some of the conjectures people are having, that it could be the reason why they are pulling back. And as it were, it's only 3 African countries, Kenya, Malawi, and Ghana, that will be recipients of this vaccine. And the very fact that it's only 30% efficacy also cast doubts about whether it will really, really make the phenomenal change. But the good thing about vaccines historically is that this is if this is successfully deployed, people can build, other institutions and stakeholders can build on that. It's possible that the organization could come back to support it in the future. It's possible that other researches, it may take a longer time, that could ensure mass production might happen in the coming years. But it's being received with mixed feeling. It's being received with some sort of concern that if you back this for this number of years and at the point of deployment you're pulling out, how do we ensure sustainability?
I think the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have deployed about $200 million so far. That's so much at this point. They are pulling out. And they say that, they are really worried about that 30% efficacy rate. It's going to be deployed in Ghana, Malawi as well. How should African countries receive this vaccine, and Kenya, you're right, receive this vaccine because of the efficacy rate? And then people are also talking about adopting multiple strategies. How should we receive it?
I think it should be a multifaceted approach. One is in the thinking of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they consider that deployment of $200 million and at the end 5 million vaccines would be rolled out annually, and that would only generate 30% efficacy rate. That funds can be deployed to other areas of either fighting malaria or other areas of needs in the health space. But I also think that this is just one approach in dealing with the issue of malaria. Countries that achieved significant reduction in death rates, countries that achieved malaria-free status from WHO, they took indigenous or homegrown solutions to address that. So the vaccine is welcome, but there are some other initiatives which there could be comparative analysis, comparative study around how did El Salvador, a country as small, it's not one of the leading countries in the world in terms of its economic capacity, but it was able to achieve that in 2017. Algeria, many other countries did. So for other countries where this is endemic, let's even isolate vaccine. Vaccine is recommended though, but if you isolate vaccine, what can we do to reduce death rate? What can we do to improve the environment? What resource allocation initiative should these countries embark on to improve the fight against malaria? It means that it has worked. If it has worked for some countries between 2000 and 2017, over 13 countries we are certified malaria free. So it means other countries that are still struggling or are still recording high rates of deaths from malaria could deploy these similar steps. And I just want to mention one of the key threats, malaria. Let me give an example. This week, I got treated for malaria. And the lab results showed that I had 2+ in medical time. So what it means is that for 2 days, besides the treatment I had over the weekend, the first 2 working days of this week, I was not at work. Malaria affects productivity. If we put it in critical terms, what the economic impact of malaria besides the death?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that I've seen anyone who is treating malaria that is able to manage and stay at work as well. A lot of people have to stay off, even just for the treatment to be effective in itself. But you mentioned homegrown solutions, and that has been, we've been talking about that since the COVID-19 pandemic, that Africa needs to find solutions to its own problem, especially health problems that are endemic in Africa. What sort of solutions should we be looking at, especially for a place like Nigeria where malaria is also endemic?
So the primary vector or trigger of malaria is mosquito. So the environment is, dealing with the environment is critical. Effectively, not just the rhetorics is that most of the things we do in all those programs are rhetoric. Effectively ensuring that access to mosquito net is in place is another important step. Of course, before we now get to the very sophisticated level of complete eradication, if we measure, we deploy also mechanism to measure. Okay, if we have ensured improved sanitation, improved the environment, in 3 months, this is the mileage covered. If more members of the population have access to treated mosquito nets, this is through M&E mechanisms, this is what has been achieved. Then we could now bring in other sophisticated measures these are all homegrown, like I said, including access to timely, like there's access to mass testing, mass treatment. Those are also important measures. And of course, we can't run away, we can't sidestep the primary health care system being effective. Once the primary health care system is working well, it is the bottom line. The catalyst that will make malaria eradication a winning.
Absolutely. No matter what we do, without a functional health system, it just all amounts to nothing. But we'll continue to watch how this plays out in Ghana, Kenya, Malawi in the coming months. Thank you so much for talking to us. Executive Director, Health Emergency Initiative, Pascal ACHUNINE.
Thank you so much.
In the U.S., where the January the 6th committee, in its final public hearing, has presented new evidence highlighting then-President Donald Trump's 3-hour refusal to publicly condemn the unfolding insurrection at the U.S. Capitol or to call off the violent mob. The primetime session, the 8 hearings so far this summer, focused on the 187 minutes between Mr. Trump telling his supporters to march to the Capitol and when he finally told them to go home. The hearing was co-led by Rep. Elaine Luria, a Virginia Democrat, and Rep. Adam Kinzinger, an Illinois Republican. And we have more in this report.
1 week after the attack, Republican leaders...
The final installment of the January 6th committee hearings have promised to lay out what happened in the White House as rioters stormed the Capitol, forcing members of Congress to shelter in place. The committee says former U.S. President Donald Trump's inaction for 187 minutes put lives in danger and nearly upended America's democracy. It says Trump tweeted out a recorded video statement calling on rioters to go home that many turned to leave. Unlike previous hearings, some changes had to be made as Representative Ben Thompson tested positive for COVID and cannot be in the hearing room.
So something a lot more kind of definitive and not ambiguous, because he has that power over his folks. Ms. Matthews, you told us about a colleague who said during the attack that the president should not condemn the violence. Can you please tell us about that moment and your reaction?
In 2016, when he was first running for office, Donald Trump said this: "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters." That quote came to mind last week when audio from Trump advisor Steve Bannon surfaced from October 31st, 2020, just a few days before the presidential election. Let's listen. Today.
Among witnesses, CBS News confirmed the committee will hear from Matthew Pottinger, a former National Security Council official, and Sarah Matthews, a former Deputy White House Press Secretary. Both resigned from their positions in the aftermath of the insurrection.
What explains President Trump's behavior? Why did he not take immediate action in a time of crisis? Because President Trump's plan for January 6th was to halt or delay Congress's official proceeding to count the votes. The mob attacked the Capitol the mob attacking the Capitol quickly caused the evacuation of both the House and the Senate. The count ground to an absolute halt and was ultimately delayed for hours. The mob was accomplishing President Trump's purpose, so of course he didn't intervene. Here's what will be clear by the end of this hearing. President Trump did not fail to act during the 187 minutes between leaving the ellipse and telling the mob to go home. He chose not to act.
Yeah, it was insufficient. I think you could count me among those who was hoping to see an unequivocal strong statement clearing out the Capitol, telling people to stand down, leave, go home. I think that's what we were hoping for.
And I disagreed. I thought that we should condemn the violence and condemn it unequivocally. And I thought that he needed to include a call to action and to tell these people to go home. And a debate ensued over it. And I became visibly frustrated, and my colleagues were well aware of that. And I couldn't believe that we were arguing over this in the middle of the West Wing, talking about the politics of a tweet, being concerned with handing the media a win when we had just watched all of that violence unfold at the Capitol. And so I motioned up at the TV and I said, do you think it looks like we're effing winning? Because I don't think it does. And I again reiterated that I thought that the president needed to condemn the violence because it didn't matter if it was coming from the left or the right, that you should condemn violence 100% of the time.
The former Deputy White House Press Secretary and former Deputy National Security Advisor both resigned from their positions in the aftermath of the insurrection.